The 3 red moons hung low over the city of Barren. Their light covered the silver towers and crowded streets in a deep crimson glow. Thousands of aliens filled the great circle at the center of the city. No one spoke. No one moved. They were all waiting for the same moment. In the middle of the stone platform stood Zyra, her head lowered and her hands trembling. Zyra already knew why she had been called there. She had known for many years that this day would come. Since childhood, she had been different from every other female of her species. She was taller, stronger, and much larger than anyone around her. Many believed she was cursed. Others treated her like a mistake that should never have existed. As she looked across the crowd, she searched for familiar faces. She found her parents standing near the front. Her younger brother was beside them, but none of them looked at her. Their eyes stayed fixed on the ground. The sight hurt more than anything else. She could face strangers judging her. Facing her own family was much harder. A tall member of the council stepped forward. His dark ceremonial robes flowed behind him as he climbed onto the platform. The crowd became even quieter. Everyone respected the council. Their decisions were considered final. Once they spoke, no one questioned them. Zyra knew there would be no chance to defend herself today. The council member raised his hand. "Zyra of House Barren," he announced, "you stand before your people because you have failed the most important purpose of our kind." His voice echoed through the circle. "Medical examinations have confirmed that your body cannot produce offspring. Because of this, you cannot contribute to the future of our species." The words struck Zyra like a blade, even though she had heard them many times before. Doctors had studied her body for years. Every test ended the same way. They believed her unusual size made reproduction impossible. To her people, that meant she had no value. Everything she was, her kindness, intelligence, and hard work, meant nothing. The council member continued speaking. "Our laws are clear. Those who cannot fulfill their role must not remain among us. You are hereby removed from your home, your position, and your community. At sunrise, you will leave this city forever." A low murmur spread through the crowd. Some looked sad. Others seemed relieved. Zyra felt tears forming in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry in front of people who had already decided her worth. She stood straight and looked at the crowd one last time. Not a single voice rose in her defense. Not one friend stepped forward. Years of loneliness suddenly felt heavier than ever. When the ceremony ended, the crowd slowly dispersed. Families returned to their homes. Merchants reopened their shops. Life moved on as if nothing important had happened. Zyra remained alone on the platform. For a few moments, she stared at the empty streets. The city where she had spent her entire life no longer wanted her. Later that night, she packed the few belongings she was allowed to keep. A small bag, some clothing, and a few personal items were all she had left. Her parents never entered her room. They never said goodbye. The silence inside the house felt colder than the air outside. Before leaving, she placed a hand on the wall and whispered a final farewell. As the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, Zyra walked toward the wastelands beyond the city. The road stretched across empty plains covered in dark stone. Wind swept across the ground, carrying dust through the air. Behind her stood the great city of Barren. Ahead of her was only uncertainty. Hours passed as she traveled farther from civilization. The city slowly disappeared behind distant hills. For the first time in her life, she was completely alone. Fear grew inside her. She had no destination and no plan. She only knew she could never return. Every step carried her farther away from everything she had ever known. Then something unexpected happened. A bright light suddenly flashed across the sky. Zyra stopped walking and looked upward. A large object was descending through the clouds. It was unlike any ship she had ever seen. Its shape was smooth and strange. Blue lights glowed along its sides as it moved toward the ground. The vessel landed several hundred meters away with a deep rumble. Dust exploded into the air around it. Zyra's heart began to race. She had heard stories about distant species that traveled between stars, but she had never met one. Slowly, a door opened on the side of the craft. A figure stepped out. It was not one of her people. It was a human, and the moment he looked at Zyra, his expression showed something she had not seen in years. Not fear, not disgust, but curiosity. And that single look was about to change both of their lives forever. The strange ship remained silent as dust slowly settled around it. Zyra stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The human who had stepped out was smaller than her, but he showed no fear. Instead, he looked at her with calm curiosity. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The empty wasteland around them felt strangely quiet. The human finally raised a hand in greeting. "Hello," he said in clear galactic standard. His voice sounded friendly and relaxed. Zyra was surprised that he spoke her language so well. Most off-world visitors rarely learned it. She hesitated before giving a small nod. She had never spoken to a human before. "My name is Ethan Carter," the human said. "I'm part of a scientific survey team." He looked at her carefully. "You seem lost." The simple question caught Zyra off guard. Nobody had asked if she was okay in a very long time. Most people only saw her size and judged her immediately. For a moment, she considered walking away. Trust did not come easily anymore. But something about Ethan felt different. He wasn't staring at her the way others did. He wasn't whispering behind her back. He wasn't treating her like a problem that needed to disappear. He was simply talking to her. "I was exiled," Zyra finally said. The words felt heavy leaving her mouth. Ethan's expression changed slightly. He seemed surprised. "Exiled?" he asked. "For what crime?" Zyra looked away toward the distant city. "I committed no crime," she answered quietly. As she explained her situation, Ethan listened carefully. He did not interrupt. He did not question her honesty. He simply listened. When she finished telling him about the council's decision, he remained silent for a few moments. The wind moved across the rocky plain between them. "That doesn't make sense," Ethan finally said. Zyra blinked in surprise. Most outsiders simply accepted the council's authority. Ethan folded his arms thoughtfully. "Your entire life was taken away because doctors believe you can't have children?" He shook his head. "There has to be more to this story." Zyra gave a bitter smile. "There isn't." She had spent years hoping someone would prove the doctors wrong. Every test ended the same way. Every specialist agreed with the previous one. Eventually, she stopped hoping. The council's decision only confirmed what she had already feared. Ethan glanced toward his ship. "Would you mind if I looked at your medical records?" he asked. Zyra stared at him. No one had ever shown interest in helping her before. Most people avoided discussing her condition. The request seemed strange, but she had nothing left to lose. "My records are public," she said. The council made sure everyone could see them. Ethan nodded. "Good." A small smile appeared on his face. "Then maybe I can understand why this happened." There was confidence in his voice that Zyra could not understand. The human invited her aboard his ship. After a brief hesitation, she followed him. The interior looked unlike anything she had ever seen. Screens covered the walls. Soft lights glowed from hidden panels. Machines quietly hummed in every corner. Everything felt advanced and organized. Ethan guided her to a comfortable seat before sitting at a nearby terminal. His fingers moved quickly across the controls. Soon, lines of information appeared on the screen. Medical reports, biological scans, and examination records filled the display. Years of tests were stored inside the files. At first, Ethan simply read in silence. Minutes passed. Then his expression slowly changed. He leaned closer to the screen. His eyes narrowed as he examined one particular report. He opened another file, then another. Soon he was scrolling through hundreds of records. "What is it?" Zyra finally asked. Ethan did not answer immediately. He continued studying the data. His face showed the same expression scientists often wore when solving difficult problems. Finally, he looked up. "Something feels wrong," he said. "Very wrong." Zyra's heart began to beat faster. "What do you mean?" Ethan turned the screen toward her. Several files were marked as incomplete. Entire sections were missing. Some records appeared damaged. Others had been altered. Large portions of information had simply vanished. It looked as if someone had removed them on purpose. "Medical systems don't lose data like this," Ethan said quietly. "Especially important data." He opened another file and frowned. "Someone deleted parts of your records." The word sent a chill through Zyra's body. "Why would anyone do that?" she asked. Ethan stared at the screen. "That's exactly what I want to find out." Then he opened an old archived document buried deep inside the database. Most of the file had been erased. Only one sentence remained visible. Ethan read it twice. His eyes widened. Slowly, he turned toward Zyra. The surviving line said, "Subject Zyra may possess fully functional reproductive capability. Further testing strongly recommended." The room fell silent. Because according to that report, the council may have known something they never wanted anyone to discover. The room remained silent after Ethan read the sentence aloud. Zyra stared at the screen, unable to believe what she had heard. For years, every doctor had told her the same thing. The council had repeated those conclusions countless times, yet the file in front of her suggested a completely different truth. Her hands trembled as she looked at the faded report. "There must be some mistake," Zyra whispered. She wanted to believe the report, but she was afraid. Hope had disappointed her too many times before. Ethan slowly shook his head. The file was old, but it appeared genuine. More importantly, it had been hidden deep inside a restricted archive. Someone clearly did not want it to be found. Ethan began searching through additional records. The deeper he looked, the stranger things became. Several medical reports were incomplete. Entire test results had vanished. Important notes had been deleted. In some places, data had been replaced with vague summaries. It was as if someone had carefully removed every piece of information that might support the old report. Hours passed as Ethan continued investigating. Zyra sat nearby, watching him work. Every few minutes, he discovered another inconsistency. The pattern became impossible to ignore. This was not random corruption or a technical failure. Someone had intentionally altered the records. Someone with authority and access. By evening, Ethan finally leaned back in his chair. "I'm certain now," he said. "These files were changed on purpose." Zyra felt her stomach tighten. If that was true, then the council's decision might have been based on false information. The thought was almost too shocking to accept. "But why?" she asked. "Why would they do this to me?" Ethan remained quiet for a moment. He carefully considered the evidence before speaking. "I think your condition frightened them." Zyra frowned in confusion. She had spent her whole life believing she was weak and flawed. The idea that anyone feared her seemed impossible. Ethan opened another document and pointed to several biological measurements. "Your body is different from others in your species," he explained. "But different does not mean defective." According to the older records, Zyra possessed several rare genetic traits. They were uncommon but not dangerous. In fact, some of them appeared beneficial. For the first time in years, Zyra felt a small spark of hope. Maybe she had never been broken at all. Maybe she had been judged simply because she did not fit society's expectations. The possibility filled her with emotions she could barely understand. Excitement mixed with fear. Hope mixed with anger. The next morning, Ethan decided to gather more evidence. He contacted several scientific databases across nearby systems. If similar cases existed elsewhere, they could help prove his theory. While waiting for responses, he reviewed historical records from Zyra's world. The deeper he searched, the more disturbing the picture became. He discovered that Zyra was not the first person to be exiled under similar circumstances. Decades earlier, Several individuals with unusual biological traits had disappeared from official records. Their names had been removed. Their stories had been forgotten. It appeared the council had been hiding inconvenient truths for generations. When Ethan shared his findings, Zyra felt a chill run through her body. The problem was much larger than she had imagined. This was not simply about her life anymore. It was about a system built on fear and control. A system that punished anyone who challenged accepted beliefs. That evening, a message finally arrived from one of Ethan's scientific contacts. The report contained research from another world with a similar species. As Ethan read through the findings, his eyes widened. The study described individuals with traits almost identical to Zyra's. Several had gone on to produce healthy offspring. Zyra could hardly breathe as Ethan showed her the data. The evidence was growing stronger. Everything the council claimed about her appeared to be wrong. Years of suffering, loneliness, and exile had been based on assumptions rather than facts. The realization was both comforting and heartbreaking. But before they could celebrate, a warning alarm suddenly echoed through the ship. Ethan immediately turned toward the main display. An unauthorized signal had entered the system. Someone was trying to access his files remotely. The screen flashed red as security programs activated. Ethan's expression darkened. They found us. Zyra's heart skipped a beat. Who found us? Ethan quickly disconnected several systems before looking at her. The council. Another alert appeared on the screen. A message followed seconds later. Stop your investigation immediately. Both of them stared at the words, because now they knew one thing for certain. The council was hiding the truth, and they were willing to do anything to keep it buried. For several long seconds, nobody moved. The giant screens continued displaying the medical report while thousands of citizens stared in disbelief. The spaceport, which had been filled with noise only moments earlier, became completely silent. Zyra stood frozen near the boarding ramp. She could hardly process what she was seeing. The words on the screen seemed impossible. The council members quickly tried to regain control of the situation. Some ordered the screens to be shut down. Others demanded the crowd remain calm. But it was too late. The evidence had already spread across the city and beyond. Citizens were recording the broadcasts and sharing them through public networks. The truth could no longer be hidden. Ethan was brought from detention as security forces struggled to contain the growing chaos. Unlike before, many officers were no longer willing to obey the council without question. They had seen the evidence themselves. They had watched decades of deception unfold before their eyes. Faith in the council was collapsing rapidly. When Ethan finally reached the spaceport, he immediately walked toward Zyra. The crowd parted to let him pass. For the first time since they met, Zyra smiled openly. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the human who had refused to abandon her. If Ethan had accepted the council's claims, none of this would have happened. A team of independent doctors soon arrived to verify the medical report. They conducted additional examinations using advanced equipment from multiple worlds. The results were reviewed repeatedly. Every test produced the same conclusion. There was no error. There was no misunderstanding. The report was accurate. The announcement spread across the spaceport within minutes. Zyra was pregnant. Shock swept through the crowd. Some citizens covered their mouths in disbelief. Others openly cried. Many struggled to accept that everything they had been taught for generations was wrong. The female they had rejected and exiled had become living proof that the council's beliefs were false. The council leaders attempted to defend themselves. They claimed they had acted based on available information. They insisted they were protecting society. But the hidden records told a different story. The evidence revealed years of deliberate manipulation, destroyed research, and erased histories. Their excuses convinced very few people. As investigations expanded, more secrets came to light. Cases similar to Zyra's were uncovered across decades of records. Many individuals had been punished simply for being different. Some had disappeared entirely from public history. Families learned that loved ones had been treated unfairly for generations. Within weeks, the council was removed from power. Independent tribunals began reviewing every major decision they had made. New leaders were chosen through public votes. For the first time in many years, people openly questioned old traditions. The society that once feared change was finally beginning to evolve. Throughout all of this, Zyra remained humble. She never sought revenge against those who had hurt her. She focused instead on preparing for the future. The support she received from ordinary citizens grew every day. Strangers who once ignored her now greeted her with kindness and respect. Ethan stayed by her side during every step of the journey. His scientific work helped expose the truth, but many people believed his greatest achievement was something else. He had looked at a lonely outcast and seen a person worth helping. While others saw a problem, he saw someone deserving of compassion. Months passed and excitement spread across the planet. Citizens eagerly followed updates about Zyra's condition. What began as a story of exile slowly transformed into a symbol of hope. Schools discussed the lessons learned from the scandal. Researchers launched new studies. Old prejudices began to fade. Then, one bright morning, the moment finally arrived. Medical teams gathered inside a modern care center, while friends and supporters waited outside. Ethan paced nervously through the hallway. Hours seemed to pass like days. Everyone knew history was being made. The entire world watched and waited for news. Finally, the doors opened. A doctor stepped into the hallway with a smile. "The child is healthy," she announced. Cheers erupted throughout the building. Ethan closed his eyes in relief. Citizens watching across the planet celebrated together. The impossible had become reality. The future the council claimed could never exist was now resting safely in Zyra's arms. Later that evening, Zyra stood beneath the same 3 red moons that had witnessed her exile. This time, however, everything was different. Thousands gathered once again, not to reject her, but to honor her. The child slept peacefully while lights filled the city skyline. As Zyra looked across the crowd, she saw hope instead of judgment. She saw acceptance instead of fear. Most of all, she saw a future that no longer belonged to old lies. Beside her stood Ethan, the human who had changed everything simply by refusing to look away. The universe often celebrated humanity for its technology, its ships, and its inventions. But on that night, the greatest human strength was something far simpler. When an entire world gave up on one person, a human chose to believe in her. And because of that choice, an outcast became a mother. A lie became the truth, and a society found the courage to change forever.